Hello everyone, welcome back. So in today's video, we'll be talking about a new discussion or we'll be discussing a new topic. So it's called the type 1 and type 2 errors, okay? So in the previous video, we had discussed about how we test a hypothesis and how and when we reject or do not reject a null hypothesis, okay? So that was the area of discussion of the previous video, and we had also talked about how do we formulate a null hypothesis or an alternative hypothesis. So these were a few things we had discussed in the previous video. So today we'll be talking about your mistakes that you can make while testing a hypothesis. So there are basically two types of mistakes that we call errors in statistical sense or in econometrics. So the first one is called your type 1 error and the second one is called your type 2 error. So what happens in type 1 error is that you reject the null hypothesis when it is true. Okay, reject the null hypothesis when it is true. So this is your type 1 error. So what is happening is you have created a null hypothesis, and based on that hypothesis you test that hypothesis, and whatever test evidence that you get is in uh, is against that hypothesis. So you reject the null hypothesis, but in reality or in the practical world, that hypothesis might actually be true, or whatever hypothesis that you have created, that idea might actually be true in the true sense, in the true world. Okay, but based on the evidence that you receive from the test that you have conducted, you will reject the null hypothesis, which is not the right way to do here, right thing to do here. So that is a type 1 error. You are rejecting the null hypothesis. You are rejecting the null hypothesis when it is actually true. So then we have a type 2 error. So what is happening in type 2 error is that you are not rejecting the null hypothesis when it is not true. So in this case, what is happening? You create a hypothesis, and uh, based on the evidence from the test that you have conducted, that hypothesis is true. So you accept that hypothesis, but in reality, that hypothesis was wrong. So you are not rejecting the hypothesis when it is not true. So you are accepting. So the other uh, opposite of, or the other synonym that I can use here in order to have a more understandable language is that you are accepting the null hypothesis when it was actually true. So whatever statement that you had created or whatever theory that you had formulated, that was actually true, that was actually false, but you are not rejecting it because the evidence that you've received from the test that you've done is in favor of that hypothesis. So you are not rejecting H naught when it is not true. So this will be more clear with the help of examples that we'll see here. So let's take the example for type 1 error that is also being described by alpha. So alpha is basically the probability. Sorry, probability of your type 1 error. Okay. So example, let's see there's a person called A. Okay. He's a male, and the null that you create is A is not pregnant. Okay. So this is the hypothesis that you will test, that A is not pregnant. So you want to test this hypothesis, and based on the data and the sample evidence, you conclude that, or the test that you have conducted, conclude that A is pregnant. So the test results are significant, and you conclude that A is pregnant. So in a way, you are rejecting H naught when it is true. So based on your test results, it comes out that A is pregnant, so you will reject this null hypothesis, which is saying that A is not pregnant. But this is actually true. So this hypothesis that you've created is actually true because A is a male, A is a male, and A cannot be pregnant. So you are rejecting your null hypothesis when it is actually true, which is a error, which is called the type 1 error here. So it is being denoted by alpha, or the probability of having a or doing a type 1 error is called your alpha. Similarly, we have type 2 error that is being denoted by beta. That is the probability of having a type 2 error. Okay, so there's a person called B. She's a female and she looks pregnant. Okay, so you create a null hypothesis that H naught, which says B is not pregnant, and based on the test evidence or based on the sample that you have, and based on that, based on the test that you do, whatever test that you choose, you come to this conclusion that H naught is true, which says that, or which concludes that B is not pregnant, but when in reality she is pregnant. Okay, so you are not rejecting the null hypothesis when it is not true. So this null hypothesis, which is saying that B is not pregnant, is not true. We know that because we can see that. So based on the sample or the test evidence, you are not rejecting the null hypothesis, which is not true. So not rejecting the null when it is not true. That is your type 2 error. Okay. I hope this was clear. So these kind of mistakes can happen while testing based on the sample data that we have, or the kind of test we are conducting, or the kind of significance level that we've taken. So this is a very practical phenomena that happens while we test a hypothesis. This is a very casual example just to make you understand key in the very simplest form what type 1 and type 2 error might look like. Okay. So type 2 error is your a non-rejection of the null hypothesis when it is not true. This null is not true here. This H naught is not true because we know for a fact that a B is pregnant. So we have to reject this null hypothesis. But with the uh, sample results or the test results, we conclude that the null is true. So we are not rejecting the null when it is actually not true. So that is your type 2 error. So the power of test is described by 1 minus the probability of type 2 error, or 1 minus beta. So remember this formula. So a lot of questions can come directly from this formula. So it's a very simple formula, and I hope you'll remember this. Uh, so the entire, or we can always work towards having a high power of test. Higher the power of the test, it means that lower the probability of your type 2 error, or higher the probability of this value coming close to 1, it means that your type 2 error is lower. So this is what we want to achieve while we test our hypothesis. Okay, so I hope this concept, this small and important concept was clear. And in the upcoming videos, we'll see how important this concept is, because when we create policies, or when we uh, come out with any new idea, we have to consider that we are not making a type 1 or type 2 error. Okay, because these might lead to huge negligence, and uh, in the policy sense, a lot of people who might actually be eligible for a policy, what do I say, policy measure. So some people who might actually be eligible for receiving the benefits of of some policy, they might get rejected due to error of this sort, of type 1 or type 2 error. So we'll see how we use these errors in different contexts, different economics and social context. Okay, so this was all for the video. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you and take care.